Vanakkam, hello, hola, namaste. This is South Indian History Podcast brought to you by. I'm just kidding. I used to write a lot of history and science blogs and notes, but nobody seemed to care. So I'm gonna try different this time. Let's see. What about me telling you the story of South Indian history that you haven't heard or you were not taught in your school? Today's podcast is History of South India, starting after the fragmentation of Mauryan Empire in the North India in the 2nd century BCE. The last great emperor of Mauryan Empire was Emperor Asoka. The South India consists of two macro regions, the Deccan Highland and the Peninsular South. The Deccan Highland and the South were in many ways distinct. They were not isolated from each other. First, rivers and trade linked them. Many of the most important rivers flow east or southeast from the upper Deccan to the seashore. Merchants conveyed crops and products up and down these rivers between the interior and the coast. There was a cultural gradient rather than a sharp divide between these two macro regions. The North Deccan incorporated both Sanskritic North Indian and also Adivasi and Dravidian cultures. Moving south reveals less North Indian culture and more Adivasi and Dravidian features. This is clearly evident in the dominant languages. In the North Deccan, the major languages like Marathi, Hindi, and Odia are derived from Sanskrit. However, from even earlier, many Dravidian language-speaking people had settled in the southern Deccan and in South India's various and diverse ecological niches. There they developed the four major languages in the Dravidian language family: Telugu, Kannada, Tamil, and Malayalam. Dravidian society of the south did not conform easily to the Brahmanic model, and Sanskrit was a language from outside the culture, a language that only a small Brahmins, elite percentage of the society used. The Satavahana dynasty. With the fragmentation of Mauryan Empire, various regionally based rulers and governors asserted their autonomy. The most prominent of these in the Deccan area was the Satavahana dynasty. They had apparently been locally powerful chieftains who accepted the lordship of Emperor Asoka Maurya. They were originally based in the western part of the Deccan Plateau, today inland in the Maharashtra province of India. When the Mauryan dynasty ended, the Satavahanas reasserted their own kingship. Then they spread their regime eastward. Eventually, they also became known as Andhra dynasty, which is the name of the eastern part of the Deccan. The Satavahanas also reached militarily and politically toward both the north and the south. To their northwest, they faced the incoming Sakas, who were Central Asians who erupted into India from the northwest and settled in what today are Gujarat and Rajasthan. The Satavahanas and Saka kings alternated victories with defeats, with no ruler being able to hold on to his military conquest for very long. In contrast, the Satavahanas achieved greater military success advancing southward down the Godavari River to the southeast coast of India. By spanning the Deccan from coast to coast, the Satavahana Empire prospered through the overseas trade. But the loosely controlled Satavahana Empire could not last. Saka armies weakened and fragmented the Satavahanas by about 220 CE or 220 AD. Although a rump of Satavahana state lasted a few decades longer. Next, the Pallava dynasty. One of the Satvahana dynasty's successors in the southwest was the Pallava dynasty. For about 600 years, from 4th century through the 9th century, the Pallava regime dominated the agriculturally and commercially rich lands around Kanchipuram in India's southeast. This region receives irrigation from both rivers flowing down from the Deccan and also from seasonal rains during the northeast monsoon. This makes rice growing especially productive. Additionally, inland and overseas trade brought riches. The origins of Pallava are ambiguous, perhaps intentionally obscured, as a series of different families over the centuries each tried to claim the dynastic name. More certain is that the first Pallavas were local subordinates of the Satvahana conquerors. The earliest firm historical evidence of Pallava dynasty has been preserved on copper plates that we can date to around 275 CE. This was just when the Satvahana Empire was fragmenting and its subordinated kings were breaking free. Over the next centuries, Pallava armies sporadically conquered north and south of the Tamil coast. At their peak in the late 6th century, their armies conquered westward up the rivers into the dry interior, even as far as the Western Ghats, covering about 7,000 square miles. The Pallavas also created a navy in order to extend their power into the island of Sri Lanka, but beyond their core region, Pallava rule tended to be relatively thin, enforced by armies, but also by the soft power of their culture. For example, one especially prominent Pallava king, Mahendravarman I, who ruled from 600 to 630 CE, proved himself a cultured man as well as a successful warrior. Some of his surviving inscriptions describe how he was born a Jain but then converted to Hindu sect of Saivism due to the influence of Saint Appar. Appar was a famous poet and leader of a Tamil religious movement devoted to Shiva, the major Hindu god of creative destruction. Appar had also converted from Jainism. Even if this may not prove to be a historically accurate biography of Mahendravarman, it shows how Jain and Hindu Saivite religious communities were in tension, each seeking to bring the Pallava king into its community. But the Saivites seem to have won, since the Pallava royal seal showed the lingam or phallic symbol of Shiva and also an image of his vehicle, the bull Nandi. Eventually, Pallava kings lost power and the empire fragmented by the late 9th century. Their Thondai Mandalam region remained agriculturally rich with prosperous land and overseas trading networks, although now under the rule of former Pallava subordinates. Next, Pallava successors. Among the Pallava's successors were Cholas based in the temple town of Tanjavur or Tanjore. They largely took over the coastal plain of southeast part of the peninsula and extended their trade and naval power extensively in the Southeast Asia. These were again a series of families that claimed the same dynastic title. Under the Cholas, temples become ever larger and more elaborate. Some were vastly wealthy from donation. For example, the Tanjavur temple reportedly had an annual income from 300 villages that totaled 500 pounds of gold, 250 pounds of jewels, and 600 pounds of silver. This temple alone employed 600 people, including priests, temple dancers, and 57 musicians and text readers. Another eventual successor dynasty were the Pandiyas. They were based not in the wetter coast, but rather in the drier upland interior of the Tamil-speaking region. The royal Pandyan dynasty is mentioned in texts dating from 4th century BCE. The dynasty title lasted in one form or another through a series of families for about 1500 years. The Cholas and Pandyans serve as excellent examples of Dravidian model of kingship that was strongest in the peninsular South India. Next, local deities. As various local communities settle in South India and elsewhere, they often focused on a local deity. These deities spoke the local language, in this case Tamil. Many were fierce warrior goddesses who ate the meat offered them by their non-vegetarian devotees. Their martial and cosmic energy, or Shakti, was enhanced. Many of these goddesses were also unmarried, so their Shakti was not controlled by a husband. This made them especially powerful but also dangerous to those who opposed or disregarded them. Some such local goddesses represented major diseases, for example, smallpox. Any devotee who survived that disease did so through the grace of the goddesses. In the Dravidian state model, the local deity stood as the divine sovereign, while the king customarily served as the divinity's first-ranked human worshipper and earthly agent. Over time, however, many South Indian kings like the Cholas and Pandiyas wished to attract into their kingdoms of Brahmins and their ritual prestige and authority. Such kings conventionally gave gifts of tax-free land in order to entice these Brahmins to settle. And all Brahmin community became known as an agrahara. Each agrahara was surrounded by its fields and dependent villages, where the lower ranked tenants did the farming but lived outside the agrahara. In many cases, Brahmin priests gained control over already important local religious sites and temples. The model of fierce meat-eating, unmarried local goddesses, however, did not conform to conventional Brahmanic concepts of the divine. This is a process by which these local deities were incorporated into the Brahmanic model. That process is called Sanskritization. Since Sanskrit is the premier and sacred Brahmanic language, to Sanskritize is for a lower ranked family or community to aspire to upward ritual and social mobility by imitating the ways of life of Brahmins or Kshatriyas. In cases where the local deity is male, he might be Sanskritized into a manifestation or son of Brahmanic male god, especially Vishnu or Shiva. If the local deity is female, she might be ritually wedded to a male Brahmanic god, but many local people still envision the deity in her earlier local identity as their own. This sometimes led to tension over possession of the identity and property of that deity. Meenakshi, as a prime example of Sanskritization process, we consider the Pandyan dynasty and the goddesses Meenakshi in their major South Indian pilgrimage city, Madurai. Meenakshi conventionally has a green complexion and holds a parrot. She first emerged from a sacred pond full of golden lotuses. This suggests that she might have originally been a local Adivasi forest goddess taken over by Dravidian culture. The earliest historical accounts have her as a Tamil-speaking, fierce, unmarried, meat-eating goddess. Her divine Sakti enabled the local Pandyan dynasty to conquer and rule the region for generations, with her Madurai home as the dynasty's capital. But after she was Sanskritized, the Brahmanic history of Meenakshi became that she was the all-Indian goddess Parvati, the consort of god Shiva. She had originally agreed as an act of grace to be born on earth as the daughter of the Pandyan king. The Pandyan king and queen had been promised a son, but instead they received a daughter with 3 breasts. They raised her as a warrior. She led the Pandyan armies to victory in all directions over both earthly kings and all over but one of the gods. When she confronted Shiva, her husband in heaven and her husband to be on earth, however, her 3rd breast disappeared. She became shy and she accepted him as her lord. One of the major rituals in the city of Madurai is the reenactment of the wedding of Meenakshi to Shiva. The Brahmanic god Vishnu stood as the bride's brother, giving her to her groom. Being invited to attend this wedding and being seated near the ceremony remains for many leading people in the region a symbolic high mark of status. Today, the major temple in Madurai includes Meenakshi's original golden lotus pond and her special shrine, but they are now off-centered, with main part of the temple now being the home of Shiva and Meenakshi as a married couple. This vast temple complex dominates the heart of the original city of Madurai.